Hello, BookTube. I have some new arrivals for you. No packages being ripped open and fed to a ravenous little schnauzer, but still brand new books, books that are forthcoming, probably all in January. Starting with a barrage of YA. The first one is by an author who claims that her name is Parker Peavyhouse. I'm kind of hoping that isn't true. Parker Peavyhouse lives in the San Francisco Bay Area and works at Hickabee's Children's Bookstore. Parker is the author of The Echo Room and a critically acclaimed collection of novellas for young adults, Where Futures End. Parker is likely trying to solve a puzzle at this very moment while enjoying In-N-Out fries, admiring redwood trees, and quoting movies about sentient robots. And this is a new book. This comes out, I think, in mid-January. This is Strange Exit. And it's a novel about, well, let me read you. It's about a group of people who are orbiting Earth because Earth is uninhabitable, and they are in a simulation while their bodies are in suspended animation. But something may be wrong. let me read you here. Let me show you the book and read you here. This is a standalone speculative thriller for young adult readers, where 17-year-old Lake spends her days aboard a ship that's been orbiting Earth since a nuclear event, searching a simulation of a strange post-apocalyptic landscape for people who have forgotten one very important thing. This isn't reality. The simulation was supposed to prepare them for life after the apocalypse, but it has trapped their minds in a shared virtual reality while their bodies remain in stasis chambers. It's up to Lake to wake them. When she reveals the truth to a fellow passenger, Taryn, he joins her mission. But time's running out before the simulation completely deconstructs, and soon Taryn's deciding who is worth saving and who must be sacrificed for the greater good. Lake pits herself against Taryn in a race to find the secret heart of the sim, where something waits that will either save them or destroy them all. And I will get to this later in the month, but I was struck by the opening. I want to read you the opening paragraph here. The San Francisco Zoo. Gates rusted open, weeds bursting through cracks in the asphalt, trees like many-armed scarecrows, broken and stunted. Lake figured she was the only person to set foot in the place for years, not counting the boy in the tiger exhibit. Lake peered in at him through a curtain of dirt over the viewing glass. She guessed he was around her age, 17. He sat on a log, hunched over something she couldn't see. No tiger in sight. Was it wandering the abandoned zoo, looking for snacks like Lake was looking for people to rescue? Lake shivered. I hope not, because that would mean she and the tiger were looking for the same thing. That's kind of good. That would certainly keep me reading, and will. Even at this remove, I'm allergic to zoos. All right. Then this next one is by Andrew Fukuda, and it is The Light Between Us. It's a World War II novel that I believe is an epistolary novel. You don't see many of those anymore, certainly not in YA. This is... the novel follows the unlikeliest of pen pals. Is that true? Is this epistolary? No, it's not. No, okay. A Japanese-American boy and a French-Jewish girl. Published in time for International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is January the 27th, and Fred Korematsu Day, which is January 30th, Fukuda deftly turns readers back 8 decades to World War II in this powerful story of hope as two teens find friendship amid catastrophe. And I thought I spotted an illustration. Was that just me imagining things? Oh no, this is an illustrated novel. Not heavily. There aren't a whole bunch of them, but still, this is illustrated. Interesting. So that comes out on January 7th, of course, like everything else in the world. And then the third of our YA titles is by Tara Sim, and it's called Scavenge the Stars. I think this is January 7th as well. Yes, it is. Oh, God. Let's see here. This is packed with high-stakes adventure, romance, and dueling identities. Scavenge the Stars is a gender-swapped retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo. The first novel in an epic YA fantasy duology. Amaya has survived years of servitude only to find out that the life she thought she had waiting for her is gone, just like her father's fortune. When Amaya rescues a mysterious stranger from drowning, she fears her rash action has earned her a longer sentence on the debtor ship where she's been held captive for years. Instead, the man she saved offers her unimaginable riches and a new identity, setting Amaya on a perilous course through the coastal city of Moray, where old-world opulence and desperate gamblers collide. And this comes out right away, right now. But that is the third of our YA books to start off, unless this fourth book is also YA. It isn't billed that way, and the only reason I suggest it, the only reason that I raised the question, is because even though things aren't billed that way, I've noted on this channel before that a lot of times stuff that is obviously YA is just making its way onto the adult list, just seeping into to adult fiction and fantasy. Much to my dismay, if the entire plot of a world-built epic fantasy clashing empire storyline revolves around which cute boy the female protagonist chooses, the book is YA. Whether the author's agent has been browbeaten into putting it forward as an adult book or not. I don't know about this. I'm not 100% sure. This is the sequel to The Queens of Innis Lear. This is Tessa Grafton's book, Lady Hotspur. And Scavenge the Stars is a kind of YA gender-swapped pastiche of The Count of Monte Cristo. And what The Queens of Innis Lear and Lady Hotspur is gender-swapped Shakespeare, with a whole bunch of fantasy elements and historical fiction elements sort of woven in. And I haven't read this yet, although I have read in it. I have poked around in it. I haven't read the whole thing. I'm partly done with it, and I've been working hard not to hold against it the intimations from its pub sheet, which is never a fair thing to do for a book. Even though the author, I think, a lot of times signs off on that work, it still isn't fair to do. The book has to be the thing that answers for the book. But in the original pub sheet to this thing, the implication, the strong implication was, well, this is like Shakespeare only done right, and that's of course not going to get any traction with me or any other sane person. But this is strike fast, love hard, live forever. This is the motto of our Moria's Lady Knights, sworn to protect the kingdom, the crown, and each other, in that order. But after a bloody rebellion and regicide, 2 young knights and childhood friends, deposed heir Banamora and reluctant new Prince Hal, must make impossible choices between friendship and kingdom and king and family. And between those 2 fierce princes is the knight who will decide all their fates, the Lady Hotspur, Isarna Percy, whose passion and support will turn the tides of the coming war or bring the kingdom to its ruin. And I confess that The Queens of Innis Lear didn't really do anything for me, but I've enjoyed the broader and more passionate tone of this book. It still strikes me as a very YA tone. I want to read you an exchange between 2 characters. Very well done. Very well done. But those of you who are familiar with reading contemporary YA will I think hear the resonances that I'm talking about right away. The rebellion had nothing to do with the succession. It was about the ruler, and our ruler, my mother, is a good queen. The people welcomed her home. They were relieved by her ambitions. Hotspur, she's building something great, and I must build greatness with her. Not merely through babies, but through my own ambition. My own vision for what our Moria can be, a place where I can love anyone, make anyone my consort, not just a husband. What other point is there to being a queen than to make a world that what we need it to be? You want to be a queen for me? No, for us. For all of us. For love. For our Moria. You should be doing that work with me. You're the one who's afraid to love me. I am, Hotspur admitted, tears hot on her cheeks. I'm afraid because I'm not Elia Lear. I cannot be equal to you, Hal. Don't you see? It worked for them because they were both already legends. Both already had crowns. They already had each other. They already had their own authority. But I'm not powerful like that. I don't have a position from which to stand. to meet you where all that matters is that we love each other. No place exists where the heart is all that matters. Not all that matters, no, but what matters most. Love should matter most. I will make a place where that is true, Hotspur. I swear it to you. That is very good. That I would read, 500 pages of that. But that is also very YA, right? Or am I mistaking it? A lot of you read a lot more YA than I do. Let me know if I'm seeing bugboos there or there aren't any. But one way or another, that this comes out in January as well, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to polishing off the whole thing at January 7th. Everything in the world, even the books in April, are coming out on January 7th. Then this next one I have read, and it's a wholehearted recommendation. Not just if you're in the mood for sort of a rough-edged, whiskey-infused murder mystery, but also if you're in the mood for a murder mystery series along those lines and haven't seen this author, because we've mentioned before on this channel many times, the fun of having a series laid out in front of you that you didn't know existed, where it's not just the one book, where you're guaranteed a regular recurrence of this thing. This author is really, really good, and unlike a lot of mystery authors out there who are writing books in series, he has been getting better steadily with every book. But even though I knew that, nothing prepared me for how good this book was. Even though it's got the ugliest cover of any book that he's ever published. But this is John Straley, and it's a Cold Storage, Alaska novel. It's a town called Cold Storage, Alaska. And the title of this one is What is Time to a Pig? A man named Gloomy Knob, an escaped convict dying to return to prison. Psychotropic interrogation techniques, a missing warhead, scratch that, several missing warheads. The more absurd the details become as events in Cold Storage, Alaska unfold, the more Gloomy Knob's world makes sense. To the reader, this seeming paradox rings painfully true. Absurdity is the state of our very real current affairs. What, with Faulknerian skill, John Straley layers memory, philosophy, and mystery with geopolitics to paint a portrait of a world that is not only possible but inevitable. What are the political, economic, and psychic consequences of mass incarceration? How can you most effectively torture information out of a person? Where is the nuclear warhead? Next to these, the titular "What is time to a pig" seems like the simplest question of all, certainly the funniest. Really, all Gloomy Knob ever wanted to be was a logger. Now, it's been 7 years since he's landed in the Ted Stevens high-security federal penitentiary, and 5 years since the end of the war, the one North Korea started when they sent a missile to Cold Storage. Serving a life sentence for the murder of his sister, Gloomy spends his time trying to forget about the past. He scrapes by, barely avoiding the gruesome spates of violence that punctuate prison life. When he can't, it doesn't matter. Gloomy knows he deserves what's coming to him. Then one day, an old family friend grabs Gloomy from his off-site workstation and smuggles him away in a hollow tree trunk. Instead of celebrating his newfound freedom, Gloomy is unmoored. Prison is where he feels he belongs, for the unspeakable wrongs he has committed, though his memory of his sister's murder is hazy at best. But his kidnappers have other plans. They believe Gloomy knows where a second nuclear warhead is hidden. And the clock is ticking. Gloomy needs to find the missing warhead fast, or his wife, his friends, and the entire town of Cold Storage will be obliterated. The only problem is he has no idea where it is. This is terrific. This is a terrific book. With John Straley, Cold Storage, with his Alaska novels, you can start anywhere. You don't need to start with the latest one or with the first one. But I want to read you, again, if you'll pardon some reading, I want to read you the beginning of this thing, because it's just amazing. Let's see here. It was late fall on the road to the dump just outside of Cold Storage, Alaska, when the mouse that would save the world scampered across the snow and first smelled a hint of rotten food. What puzzled her most was that the smell emanated not from the landfill, but from beneath her 4 pink and taloned feet. It was the first snowfall of the year, and just a few inches covered the ground. The smell came up from the vent in the snow, up from the damp mineral soil. Her whiskers flicked the surface, and her pink nose pushed away the crust of ice. Then she began to dig, following the air that carried the smell of something sour and edible. Down she went, through the veins of frozen roots and heart-sized stones. She followed the scent as it became stronger, her shrunken stomach rumbling. In a few feet, she came to a hard iron wall that resisted her digging, and she crawled along its edge until she encountered a long crack where the wall had buried itself into the rocks of a roadbed. There, near the edge, was a tiny gap where something had pulled against the hard wall and bent it back just enough for a thin mouse to squeeze through. After her skull was through, her stomach was nothing. Her pelvis, the other large bone in a mouse's body, could wriggle through. Once in, she smelled a world of decay and fecundity. Her stomach clinched down. She could make a nest here as long as there were no dangers. She'd seen no evidence of big animals having come this way, but still she would be careful, blend in, not rush toward the food, for that would be foolish. She would be invisible for as long as she could stand it. The mouse that would save the world was not rash nor ignorant. She worked her way around the enclosure. She heard nothing. She smelled no breath of mammal, no breath of meat-eater, no footfall of hunter. She stood still for long series of heartbeats, then moved again, then stood still again. She climbed up boxes and found rotten meat. She ate again. She found something incredibly sweet, but covered in green mold. She ate a bite, but then decided to save it. There were good materials to make nests here. She began to relax. She peed on the box with the food to mark it as hers. She climbed another crate. She froze. Barely breathing, she stared. In the corner, behind a tangle of wires, was an animal with one eye, something that breathed in a way she had never heard before. As she stood stock still, the mouse that would save the world could not take a breath. The monster lay purring as it slowly, slowly opened and closed its one eye. Bet you can guess what that monster is. So, what is time to a pig? Looks terrible, I know, but it was delightful. This next one, I haven't read yet. We saw the advanced copy, and a lot of you expressed interest, and I'm interested too. Let's see. This comes out, I'm sure, January 7th. I don't know why I'm even bothered to look. Oh, no, January 14th. This is the finished copy of Colin O'Brady's The Impossible First, in which he crosses the Antarctica alone. And unlike the advanced copy, this will have pictures. Yes, this has pictures. So where is our hero? Where is our hero? Wow, what a picture. Okay, here, let's... Yeah, okay, this is loaded with color photos of the author doing his thing. But I want to show you this one picture. This is amazing. I think this is him in all of his gear. That's him in all of his gear. But let me tell you a little about this. We've seen this already, but some of you may not dote on every single detail of every single video that I make. Let's see here. Prior to December 8, 2018, no individual had crossed the landmass of Antarctica alone without support and completely human-powered. Yet Colin O'Brady was determined to do just that. His treacherous and triumphant tale is brought to life in this book. And that I'm always up for things like this. This comes out in the middle of the month, and I have the advanced copy and haven't got to it yet. This will be a breeze to read. It won't be any time at all. But those of you who maybe love adventure stories like this, or who have somebody who does love them on your list, your perpetual book-giving list, you should make note of that. Then this next one I have read. I thought it was impressive. I really did. Even though I was expecting to be impressed. This is Ezra Klein. A lot of you will know him. He from infrequent appearances that he makes on cable news shows. And he's also an authority in his own right. He's editor-in-large and co-founder of Vox, the award-winning explanatory news organization. And he also wrote extensively for the Washington Post. That is our author, Ezra Klein. And this is his new book, Why We're Polarized. Very somber, simple cover, and very, very simple question. And I confess, even with the author's reputation, he's a smart kid and balanced in his thinking. He's not a bandwagon jumper. He's not never recites talking points, nothing like that. Digs deep, thinks about what's happening in the world. Even though I knew all of that, I went into this doubtful because I guess I've read too many of these types of books. Why We're Polarized is by definition a Trump book. since he's the polarizer in chief. He wants those polarizations to be worse than they are. Look back at his campaign trail promises in 2016, promising to unite the country. Even his own followers think that's hilarious now. It's so obviously not what he wants to do. And, given that fact, I assumed that this would be shallow, unhelpfully angry, jingoistic, and it's none of those things. This is actually a serious and wonderful book. Wonderful in the sense of how it's done, in the sense of the brain, intelligence behind it, not in the sense of anything that it has to say. Oh my God. Although, Ezra Klein he does feel compelled to inject a note of hope, to say, I know things look really bad, but here are some ways. Why We're Polarized is not only that, it's also how we can maybe stop being so polarized. Some steps that can be taken. It's not in any way a how-to book, it's not meant to be that. It's mainly a diagnosis. And it's important. I don't often say that about what we have to call Trump books. I don't often say, most of them aren't important. But this one I think would get you thinking. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, I think it would get you thinking. And that's all I'll say about it. I recommend it. No matter where you are electorally, no matter what you think. I don't imagine there are many people in the country who, despite what Donald Trump himself might say, I don't think there are many people in the country who would enthusiastically say, yeah, I'm an enthusiastic Trump supporter. But there probably are lots and lots of people who are anti-democratic and also who are enthusiastic supporters of the stuff that Trump's administration does, whether they, embrace him personally or not. And a lot of those people, if some of those people are listening to this video, a lot of those people might think, well, Ezra Klein is a poster boy for the bi-coastal elite, the very thing that is demonized to that segment of the population nonstop every day. So surely any book he writes will be of no interest to us, and that is not true. That's the final point I want to make about this, is that this book is not just for those bi-coastal elites. I don't think those bi-coastal elites exist, but that's a subject for another time. But this is for everybody, no matter where you stand on Donald Trump or on immigration or on warmongering or on deficit ballooning or whatever, or immigration control, wherever you stand on any of the subjects of the day, you're going to have to admit that America is more politically polarized than it's ever been in its history. In 2016, early 2017, it used to be popular for cable news anchors on the right and the left to say that the country was more polarized than it had been in any time since the Civil War. But I think it's safe to say more polarized than it's ever been. Just because the sides aren't going to war doesn't mean the polarization is any less. It's in fact more. And the reasons for that are because, in my opinion, and partially it seems like Ezra Klein might agree with me, the reasons for the polarization are almost non-political. There's almost no political element involved. It's instead much more severe than that, much more serious, much less reparable, because it's much more cultural, much more personal. But no matter where you sit on the subject, this will be of interest to you. It will get you going, and you won't feel talked down to. And then the last book that I want to show you is also a January release. This is February. Oh, thank God. This is a February release. We saw the advanced copy of it. This is by Rudiger Barth and Hauke Fredericks, and it is The Last Winter of the Weimar Republic, The Rise of the Third Reich. It's a fast-paced book. It's written for a very popular general audience. Character thumbnails are primary color. The hesitation that you hear here is that those of you who read extensively on the Weimar Republic or on the rise of Nazi Germany, or both, might find this a little shallow, maybe a little slangy, a little novelistic. That is clearly the approach that the authors are going for, and I noticed the approach, and I'm not all that big a fan of it in works of history. I noticed the approach right away, but I didn't notice any corner cutting because of it. I didn't notice anything that was wrong. Whereas in Bill O'Reilly style slangy novelistic retellings of major pivotal points in history, it's not just the slang that bugs you, it's also that the facts are the corners are cut in every way. I didn't notice much here of that. This is the type of book that anybody could pick up and read, and I think that's to be commended. And it can't help but have a resonance. In 2020, I would give anything not to be able to say that, but it can't help but have a resonance with autocratic right-wing fascist figures getting elected all over the world. It's hard not to notice the resonances. There are two things that you come away with, that I came away with at the end of reading this book, about Paul Hindenburg, about the democratic assembly, the democratic governance of the Weimar Republic in the face of Hitler's coalition, which had far less than half the vote, was in fact, in other words, resistible. In 1933, Hitler was resistible. No deal need have been made with him. And the two things that I came out of this really, really thinking were, first that this was all preventable. If the grandees, if the political grandees of the day had said, no, you're a rabble of thugs. We don't care at all if you have 25% of the vote. You don't get anything. And if you don't like it, lump it. That was possible. That is crystal clear in the course of this book, is that was possible. That was a road not taken. And the other thing that is crystal clear at the end of this book is the absolute death of the lie that is still sometimes floated, which is that in the early 1930s, none of the people in the established government of the Weimar Republic had any idea what the Nazis really were, who Hitler really was. That they bought into this international idea in the 1920s that he was a man of mystery, that no one really knew his capacities. That in the 1930s, his party, they seem energetic. They seem to have a lot of vocal support among the people, but no one really knows what they are or what they might do if they had power of their own. By the time this book is over, that myth is gone. It should never have had a moment's time in daylight. Hitler had been making clear for 25 years before the events in this book exactly who he was. He had been making that crystal clear with complete consistency, and so had all of his followers. I didn't believe for a minute. Some of the protests came from some of these Weimar Republic figures saying, we couldn't have known. How could we have known? I didn't believe it for a minute. I believe it less after reading this. So I can recommend this book when you see it on your tables, on your bookstore tables in February. I can recommend it, but my only hesitation here, the only reservation that you're hearing, and it's not fair to the book, but it's just that I know a lot of you now. I know a lot of the people who are watching this channel, and I know a lot of the people who are watching this channel have read extensively on the rise of Nazi Germany, on World War II, on the politics of the 1930s, on the politics of fascism, on the Weimar Republic even. And those people aren't going to be completely satisfied with this book. It's going to seem, to them, this is going to seem like an occasionally interesting but fairly obvious rehashing of the stuff they already knew. I want to stress that those people are a tiny minority of the people who would still find this book interesting. So I do recommend it, absolutely, especially since it's unflaggingly interesting, which a lot of books on this subject in this time period are not, despite how momentous the events are. So that wraps it up. Those are some recent books. We'll do a Steve Pyramid here, The Last Winter of the Weimar Republic, a very approachable work of history on a very important subject. And then we have Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein. Ditto. Probably 2020's first important current events political Trump book to read. Probably the decade's first such book. Then The Impossible First, one man walking across Antarctica. We have What is Time to a Pig, the latest John Straley mystery. I hope this one is the one that finally kicks him into overdrive and gets him noticed by a whole bunch of people. And then we have Lady Hotspur, a big, generous sequel to The Queens of Innisleer. Let's see here. Then we have Scavenge the Stars, a YA gender-swapped retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo. This Light Between Us, unlikely pen-pal relationship that develops between two people. and Strange Exit, a young woman who is trying to help people who are caught in what was originally meant to be a life-saving simulation. So those are some recent new arrivals for you. Sorry, no packages being torn open, no Frenzied Bean, but there'll be plenty of that in the future. So I'm gonna wrap this up for now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.